I never imagined that after 43 years of marriage, I would spend International Women's Day preparing for the ultimate betrayal. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, of honoring the woman I had dedicated my life to. Instead, I found myself walking through a high-end jewelry store, picking out a gift for the woman who had already decided I wasn't enough. The streets were bustling with couples, husbands carrying bouquets of flowers, smiling women holding hands with their loved ones. I used to be one of them. I used to believe in the illusion that love, loyalty, and time meant something. But now, standing at the counter, examining a Tiffany & Company box, I knew better. The saleswoman smiled warmly. "This is one of our finest pieces. Perfect for a special woman in your life." I forced a smile, nodding as I took the box in my hands. It was perfect. Not because of the necklace inside, but because of what else I was going to place inside it. As I left the store, I checked my phone. My wife, Linda, had sent me a message earlier in the morning. "Happy Women's Day, darling. Can't wait for tonight. I love you." A beautiful lie. I knew the truth now. Knew about the late-night texts, the sudden business meetings, the weekend spa retreats that were nothing more than an excuse to spend time with him. And tonight, the biggest insult of them all, she thought she could sit across from me at a romantic dinner, smiling like a devoted wife, while in reality, she had already given herself to another man. I had suspected for months. It started with small things. She would get home late from work and rush straight to the shower. She guarded her phone like it held national secrets. And then, of course, there were the emotional shifts, one moment distant, the next overly affectionate, as if trying to erase the guilt. 3 weeks ago, I had confirmed everything. I had her passcode. It wasn't hard to guess, our anniversary date. Almost poetic. And when I opened her messages, I found everything I needed. "I can't wait to see you tonight, my love. Being with him is just an act. You are my real happiness." I read those words again and again, each time feeling something inside me break. And then came the photos. Her in a hotel room. Candles, wine, silk sheets, things she hadn't bothered to do for me in years. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of the woman who had betrayed me, wondering how many times she had whispered his name instead of mine. I could have confronted her then. I could have thrown her out, screamed, demanded an explanation. But why? What would be the point? No, Linda needed to learn the same way I did, through cold, undeniable proof. So I had started planning. Slowly, carefully. I gathered evidence, took screenshots, printed messages. I hired a private investigator, not because I needed more proof, but because I wanted every last detail. And tonight, on the night she expected to be showered with love and gifts, I would give her the one thing she truly deserved, truth. As I walked toward my car, the little blue box felt heavier in my pocket. Inside, nestled next to the necklace, was a USB drive. On it, a collection of everything she thought was hidden. A highlight reel of her lies. Tonight, when I handed her that gift, she would open it with a smile, expecting diamonds, expecting love. Instead, she would find the end of everything. The restaurant was packed with couples celebrating International Women's Day. Soft music played in the background, the scent of roses and expensive perfume filled the air. I sat at our reserved table, a prime spot near the window, waiting for my wife to arrive. She had texted me earlier. "Running a little late, honey. Just finishing up at the salon. Can't wait to see you. Love you." Another lie. I already knew exactly where she was. Not at a salon, not rushing to meet me. She was with him. I checked my watch. If my calculations were correct, she was just now slipping out of that hotel room, fixing her makeup, erasing every trace of her betrayal before stepping into our evening like the devoted wife she pretended to be. I took a slow sip of whiskey, the ice clinking softly against the glass. This wasn't anger. No, anger was temporary. This was something deeper, something colder. This was the patience of a man who had spent weeks, months even, planning something that would cut her deeper than any words ever could. Then I saw her. She walked into the restaurant, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her red dress hugging her figure in a way that once would have left me breathless. Now I only saw the woman who had spit on 43 years of marriage, who had chosen lust over loyalty, deception over devotion. She spotted me and waved, her face lighting up with a smile. I smiled back. A perfect husband, waiting for his perfect wife. Happy Women's Day, darling, she purred as she leaned down and kissed my cheek. The scent of her perfume mixed with something else, something faint, something unfamiliar. Him. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. You look stunning, I said, gesturing for her to sit. Her eyes sparkled as she settled into her chair. You always know how to make me feel special. Oh, she had no idea. The waiter appeared, taking our orders. She picked an expensive wine, she always did when I was paying. I ordered steak, rare. Something about the rawness of it felt fitting tonight. So, how was your day? I asked, watching her closely. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Most wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Oh, busy, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Work was crazy, and then the salon took forever. But I didn't want to be late for my handsome husband. I forced a chuckle. Of course. Always so dedicated. She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. I love you, Daniel. I held her gaze. I know you do. A shadow of something flickered in her eyes, but before she could dwell on it, the waiter returned with our drinks. I raised my glass. A toast, I said. To the woman who has shared my life, my love, and my trust for 43 years. She beamed, clinking her glass against mine. To us. I took a sip, savoring the moment. She had no idea this was the last toast we would ever share. Dinner progressed, the conversation light, rehearsed. She was playing the role of the doting wife, the woman who adored her husband. But I knew the truth. And soon, so would she. As dessert was served, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small Tiffany & Company box, setting it gently on the table. Her eyes widened with delight. Daniel! You didn't have to. Open it, I interrupted, my voice even. She let out a soft laugh, fingers trembling slightly as she untied the ribbon. She lifted the lid, and there it was, the delicate diamond necklace resting against the soft velvet. Her lips parted in admiration. Oh, Daniel, it's beautiful. Then she noticed it. The small USB drive tucked neatly beside the necklace. Her smile faltered. What's this? I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully. Something special. A little surprise. She laughed nervously, picking it up. Is this a video? You could say that. Her hands tightened around the tiny device. She was catching on now, her mind racing. I pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and then turned the screen toward her. A video began to play. A hotel room. Her. Him. A date stamp from just 3 hours ago. She went pale. The fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against the plate. Her breathing grew shallow, her entire body frozen in place. I took another sip of my whiskey, letting the silence stretch between us. Around us, people laughed, clinked glasses, celebrated love. But at our table? There was only devastation. She finally looked up at me, her lips trembling. Daniel. I can explain? I held up a hand, silencing her. No. You can't. Her eyes darted around, as if looking for an escape, but there was none. She was trapped. Trapped in the perfect life she had thrown away. Trapped in the lie she had built for herself. Trapped with the one person who knew exactly what she was. I leaned forward, my voice low, cold. "Enjoy your dessert, Linda. It's the last meal you'll ever have as my wife." And with that, I stood, leaving her in the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. I didn't turn back. As I walked out of the restaurant, leaving Linda frozen in her seat, her eyes wide with shock, I felt no hesitation, no second thoughts. There was no satisfaction either. Not yet. The job wasn't finished. This wasn't just about exposing her. No, that would be too easy. She needed to feel everything I had felt, the betrayal, the humiliation, the pain so deep that it ripped apart the very foundation of everything she thought was real. She had chosen to spit on 43 years of marriage? Fine. Let's see how she likes drowning in the consequences. Outside, the night air was cold against my face. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone and dialed. 1 ring. 2. Then, a woman's voice answered. Rebecca Monroe. Robert Monroe's wife. Daniel, she sounded confused. It's late. I took a deep breath. Rebecca, I need to meet you. It's about your husband. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. When, she finally asked. Right now. A pause. Then, with a voice colder than mine, she answered. Where? Linda was still sitting at the table, staring at the Tiffany & Company box as if it held a ticking bomb, because for her, it did. The video, the proof, the irrefutable truth of who she was. But I wasn't there to watch her unravel. I had bigger plans. By the time I reached the rendezvous point, Rebecca was already there. She was sitting in her black Range Rover, engine idling, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. I slid into the passenger seat without a word and handed her a small envelope. She took it hesitantly, then pulled out the photos inside. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. There he was. Robert. The man she had built a life with. The man she had trusted. In a hotel room. Holding my wife the way he should have been holding only her. She let out a sharp breath, her nails digging into the paper. When, she finally whispered. Today. My voice was steady. Cold. 3 hours ago. Rebecca clenched her jaw. I knew. I fucking knew. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, there was no sadness. Only rage. What are we going to do about it? She asked. I turned to her, my own anger mirroring hers. We ruined them. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Linda was panicking. She had tried calling me, but I had blocked her number. She had tried texting, but her messages weren't going through. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her life. But she had bigger problems. Because the moment Rebecca and I finished our conversation, she made a call of her own. To her lawyer. Robert Monroe was a powerful man, a respected businessman. A man who had built his empire on a foundation of deceit and manipulation. He thought he was untouchable. But Rebecca owned 51% of his company. By morning, she had frozen their shared accounts, locked him out of their assets, and filed for divorce. By noon, she had leaked the hotel footage to every major investor. By nightfall, his company was in free fall. And Linda? Linda had no idea that the walls were about to close in on her, too. I didn't go home that night. There was nothing for me there. Instead, I checked into a hotel. Not the kind she liked, the 5-star, champagne on arrival kind. No. I chose something simple. Clean. Efficient. A place for a man who had just burned his old life to the ground and was standing among the ashes, deciding what to do next. Sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the look in her eyes when she realized the gift I had given her wasn't diamonds, but destruction. I thought about what came next. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The night wasn't over. Not for Linda. Not for Robert. And certainly not for me. While Linda sat in the ruins of her perfect little world, desperately trying to figure out how everything had crumbled so quickly, Rebecca and I were orchestrating their complete destruction. Robert Monroe was a powerful man, but he had one fatal flaw: he believed he was untouchable. He thought money and influence could cover up any scandal, erase any mistake. But he underestimated two things: a woman scorned and a man who had nothing left to lose. Rebecca wasn't crying anymore. The moment she saw those photos, something inside her snapped. She wasn't heartbroken. She was furious. And furious women don't just walk away, they burn everything down on their way out. She tapped a few buttons on her phone, her fingers steady. I watched as she sent every single investor, board member, and business associate of Roberts a file. A file containing his secret bank transfers, illegally funneled company funds, and hotel records showing his frequent business trips, the ones where Linda was the real business. The moment she hit send, she exhaled and said, "It's done." By morning, Robert Monroe's career would be ashes. Linda tried to call me. Over and over and over. Blocked. Then came the messages. "Daniel, please, I need to talk to you. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain. I love you. Don't do this to us." Us? There was no us. Not anymore. I let her messages sit unread, just like she had ignored my trust all these years. By the time morning came, the first major bomb exploded. Robert walked into his office, still unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Security was waiting. So was the board of directors. The moment he stepped inside, the CEO of his company, a man who had been his business partner for over 20 years, looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're done." Robert actually laughed. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, straightening his tie. "Whatever you think you know, I can fix this." Then they handed him the files. The bank statements. The hotel records. The surveillance photos. His face went pale. By noon, his assets were frozen, his shares dropped, and his entire career was in free fall. By 3 in the afternoon, the story hit the media. Billionaire CEO Robert Monroe exposed in cheating and fraud scandal. The comments poured in. This man just lost everything in a day. Hope his side piece was worth it. Another rich scumbag exposed. Good riddance. His reputation was gone. His career was dead. And then, at 4 in the afternoon, the final hit. Rebecca, his wife, walked into his office with divorce papers. She set them down on his desk and said, "Sign them." Robert just stared at her. "Rebecca, we can fix this." She tilted her head and smiled. "Oh, honey. We already did." She turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the rubble of his empire. Linda still had no idea what was coming for her. She thought her worst problem was me leaving her. She thought, if she begged enough, if she cried enough, I'd take her back. She was about to learn the truth. At 5 in the afternoon, I made one phone call to our bank. "Yes, I'd like to freeze our joint accounts." Effective immediately. Within minutes, her credit cards stopped working. Her personal account was closed. Her savings were gone. The next time she tried to pay for something, anything, she'd realize she had nothing left. But that wasn't the final blow. No. That was coming at 8 in the evening. at exactly 8, she showed up at my office. Tear-streaked, desperate, her perfect makeup smudged. "Daniel, please," she sobbed, gripping the front of my shirt. "I made a mistake. I was stupid. I didn't mean to hurt you." I looked down at her hands clutching me. The same hands that had touched him. The same hands that had held her phone while she whispered "I love you" to another man. I removed her hands from my shirt. "You didn't just hurt me," I said quietly. "You destroyed everything." She sobbed harder. "But we can fix this. I'll do anything. You'll leave, Linda." Her breath caught. What? I stepped back and looked her dead in the eyes. "You have 10 minutes to pack your things and get out of my house." Her face crumpled. "Daniel, I have nowhere to go." I shrugged. "Not my problem." I turned and walked inside, closing the door in her face. I stood there, listening. Listening to her cry. Listening to her realize that for the first time in her life, no one was coming to save her. Linda didn't leave. I knew she wouldn't. Even as I locked the door and listened to her sobbing outside, I knew she wouldn't just walk away. Women like her don't accept consequences. They manipulate, they cry, they beg, they try to twist the situation until they become the victim. I could hear her pacing outside the house, her breathing ragged. Then, silence. I glanced at the security feed on my phone. She wasn't leaving. She was calling someone. I turned up the volume. "Robert! Pick up! Please, I don't know what to do." Her voice was frantic, desperate. I almost laughed. Robert? That man couldn't even save himself, and she thought he'd be able to help her? I checked the time. It was past midnight. Robert had bigger problems than her right now. Linda didn't know that yet, but she would soon. I walked to my bar, poured myself a drink, and waited. Waited for her to realize there was no one left to run to. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then I heard it. Banging on the door. "Daniel! Please! Open the door!" I sipped my drink and let her scream into the empty night. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. I smiled. "Oh, Linda." I already had. At 6 in the morning, I checked the cameras again. She was still there. She had spent the entire night sitting on the front steps, arms wrapped around herself, shivering in the cold. Pathetic. I stepped outside. She looked up, eyes red and swollen, her once flawless hair a tangled mess. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't speak." She swallowed, her lips trembling. I walked past her and unlocked the front gate. "Get out. Daniel, please, just let me expel." "Get out." Tears spilled down her face. "I have nowhere to go." I stared at her. "Not my problem." She wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Just let me stay for a few days until I figure things out." I let out a small chuckle. "A few days? Linda, you don't seem to understand. You're never stepping foot in this house again." Her breath hitched. "You don't mean that." I tilted my head. "Don't I?" She reached for me, but I stepped back. "You're not my wife anymore, Linda. You stopped being my wife the second you let another man touch you." She gasped, as if the words physically hurt her. "I didn't care. You have 1 hour to leave before I call the police and have you dragged out." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't? Try me." She flinched. For the first time, she believed me. She left. I watched from the window as she stumbled down the driveway, looking around as if hoping someone would appear and offer her a lifeline. No one did. I waited until she was completely gone before making my next call. Yes, I'd like to change the security codes to my house. The locks were changed within the hour. Linda would never be able to get in again. She was gone. For now. But I knew she wasn't done. She would try to crawl back. She would try to fix this. And I would be ready. At noon, I got a call. Not from Linda. From Rebecca. "It's done," she said. I smiled. "How bad is it?" I asked. She let out a small laugh. "Daniel, Robert has officially lost everything." I sat down, pouring myself another drink. "Tell me everything." She sighed. "His assets are frozen. His business partners have cut him off. His reputation is ruined. And to top it off?" She paused for effect. "He's homeless." I almost dropped my glass. "What?" Rebecca laughed. "I kicked him out. He has nowhere to go. He called me last night, begging to come home. I told him to go to hell." A slow smile spread across my face. Linda had put all her faith in a man who no longer had anything to offer her. This was better than I ever could have planned. "So," Rebecca continued, "what's next?" I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "Now," I said. "Now, we watch them drown." At 7 in the evening, I got another call. Linda. This time, I answered. "Daniel," she gasped. I need help." I stayed silent. She let out a shaky breath. "I went to Robert's house, but he's not there. His wife kicked him out. I don't know where he is. I don't know what to do." I leaned back. "So, let me get this straight. You cheated on me, destroyed our marriage, and threw away everything we built together, and now the man you did it for can't even give you a place to sleep?" Silence. I let out a small chuckle. "Linda," I said slowly, "you made your bed. Now sleep in it." She started sobbing again. "Daniel, please. I have nothing left." I shook my head. "Not my problem." And then, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Linda and Robert had built their relationship on lies, deception, and betrayal. And now? Now, they had nothing. Meanwhile, I had everything. Because I had peace. I had control. And most importantly, I had won. I slept like a king. For the first time in years, there was no tension in my chest, no gnawing anxiety, no woman lying beside me pretending to be loyal while sneaking off to another man. The house was silent, peaceful. No more whispered phone calls. No more late-night showers to wash off the scent of betrayal. No more lies. Linda was gone. Robert was ruined. And I? I was free. But the game wasn't over. Not yet. Linda still had hope. She still thought there was a way back. I needed to make sure she understood, there was none. At noon, I got another call. Linda. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. "Daniel, please, just talk to me. I don't have anywhere to go." I tried calling Robert, but he's not answering me either. I think his wife did something to him. Please, I need you. I made a mistake, I know that now. Just let me come home. Let me explain. Please. I poured myself a drink and listened to it again. Then I deleted it. There was nothing she could say that would undo what she had done. She wasn't calling because she loved me. She was calling because she was desperate. And I wanted her to suffer just a little longer. By the evening, I decided it was time for one last move. I had taken her home. I had taken her money. I had taken away her affair. But there was one more thing left to take. Her reputation. She had spent decades playing the role of the devoted wife, the loving mother, the perfect woman. People admired her. Respected her. That was about to change. I made a few calls. And by morning, the entire town would know exactly who Linda Monroe really was. At 7 in the morning, I got a message from my son. "Dad, what the hell is happening?" I smirked. I could already imagine it. Linda waking up, checking her phone, seeing her entire world collapsing in real time. Because today, her secret wasn't a secret anymore. Every single person she cared about had received an email. Her family. Her friends. Her co-workers. And inside? Screenshots. Photos. Hotel records. Everything. There was no escaping it. She couldn't spin the story. Couldn't pretend. She had been caught, and now the whole world knew. An hour later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But I wanted to hear her voice one last time. "Daniel." She sobbed. I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of my coffee. "Morning, Linda." "Rough night?" She gasped. "How could you do this to me?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Do this to you?" I repeated. "Linda, you did this to yourself." She hiccuped between sobs. "My family won't talk to me. My own sister blocked me. My job suspended me because of moral concerns. I have nothing left." I smiled. "Good." Silence. "You're enjoying this," she whispered, voice full of horror. I set my cup down. "You enjoyed it too, didn't you? Every time you snuck around, every time you lied to my face, you enjoyed it. You felt powerful, didn't you? Untouchable." "Daniel, please." "No, Linda," I cut her off. "Now you know what it feels like to be powerless." She whimpered. And I ended the call. For the last time. Linda had officially hit rock bottom. Her home, gone. Her money, gone. Her reputation, destroyed. Her family, ashamed of her. She had nothing left. But there was one more thing I needed to do before this was truly over. I needed to make sure she understood, there was no coming back from this. I was sitting on my porch, drinking my morning coffee, when a car pulled into my driveway. Linda. Her hair was a mess, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She stepped out of the car hesitantly, her hands shaking as she clutched the door. "Daniel, please. Just listen to me." I took a slow sip of my coffee, staring at her over the rim of my cup. "Linda, I thought I made myself clear. We have nothing to talk about." She shook her head, stepping forward. No, you don't understand. I need your help. Please." I raised an eyebrow. "Help? Now you want my help?" She nodded frantically. "I have nowhere to go. No money. No one will talk to me. I tried to get a hotel, but my credit cards don't work. I tried calling friends, but they blocked me. I went to Robert's old place, but his wife had the locks changed. She burst into tears. I watched, unimpressed. "Let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You threw away our marriage for another man. Lied to me. Made a fool out of me. And now that your little fantasy world has collapsed, you think I'm going to save you? She wiped her nose with the sleeve of her once expensive coat. Daniel, I made a mistake. I see that now. I don't love him. I was stupid, okay? You just thought I'd always be here, I interrupted coldly. That no matter what you did, I'd be waiting for you, ready to forgive you. She flinched. I shook my head, setting my coffee down. You weren't stupid, Linda. You were selfish. She gasped, stepping closer. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but just let me stay here. Just for a little while. Please. Just until I can get back on my feet. I leaned forward. And what makes you think you'll ever get back on your feet? Her mouth opened and closed, her face pale. I smirked. Do you really think you can just start over? Get a job? Rent an apartment? You have no money. No credit. No one will hire you after what happened at work. You spent your entire life relying on me. She started shaking. Daniel, please. I stood up, towering over her. You made your choice, I said, my voice low and calm. And now you have to live with it. A sob ripped from her throat. She collapsed to her knees. She actually fell to her knees. Daniel, I'll do anything. Please. I stared down at her. This was the same woman who had once looked me in the eyes and told me I was the love of her life. The same woman who had smiled at me while secretly sharing a bed with another man. Now, she was nothing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. I took out a single $20 bill and tossed it onto the ground in front of her. Here, I said. That should be enough for a cheap motel. Her face crumpled. She didn't pick it up. She just sat there, shaking her head in disbelief. I stepped back. Goodbye, Linda. Then I turned and walked inside, locking the door behind me. For the first time in 43 years, I felt weightless. Truly free. And Linda? She was finally alone. Linda had nothing. And that thought alone should have satisfied me. But it didn't. Not yet. Because I knew women like her. They don't just accept defeat. They crawl. They manipulate. They find one last way to slither back into your life. Linda had already lost everything, her home, her money, her reputation, her family. But she still had hope. And I needed to crush that too. That evening, I received an unexpected call. It wasn't Linda. It was my daughter. Dad, we need to talk, she said, her voice tense. I exhaled slowly. I had been waiting for this. Let me guess, I said. She called you, didn't she? There was a pause. Then, a sigh. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. And what did she tell you? That she made a mistake. That she regrets everything. That she has nowhere to go. I smirked. Of course she did. She's trying to make me feel guilty, my daughter admitted. She said she's still my mother, no matter what happened. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice calm. If I was the one who cheated, if I was the one who threw away 43 years of marriage for some cheap thrill, do you think she would have forgiven me? Silence. Then, a quiet, no. Then why should you? More silence. Then, a deep breath. You're right, she said. I needed to hear it from you. I smiled. Good girl. Linda was officially alone. Her last hope, our children, had just shut the door in her face. and I knew that realization would break her in a way nothing else could. Because losing me was one thing. Losing her own children? That was a pain she would never recover from. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. But the universe? It wasn't done with Linda yet. Because that's when I got the call. Not from her. From Robert. I almost didn't answer. I had no reason to. But curiosity got the best of me. I picked up. Robert. Silence. Then, a chuckle. A low, bitter sound. Well, Daniel, you really did it, didn't you? I took a sip of my coffee. Did what, exactly? You ruined me. I smirked. No, Robert. You ruined yourself. Another bitter laugh. She came to me, you know, he said. Your wife. Or, your ex-wife, I guess. I didn't say anything. I already knew where this was going. She was desperate. Crying. Begging me to take her in. Said she had nowhere else to go. And what did you do? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I laughed in her face. I grinned. Good. She actually thought I'd save her, Robert continued. Even after my life got destroyed because of her. I chuckled. Women like her don't change, Robert. They just look for the next best option. He sighed. Yeah. Well, she's your problem now. I smirked. No, Robert. She's nobody's problem now. And then, for the first time in this entire nightmare, Robert and I laughed together. Linda was done. She had lost everything. And no one was coming to save her. Not me. Not our kids. Not Robert. No one. She had betrayed everyone who ever loved her. And now, she would live the rest of her life with nothing but regret. And that? That was better than any revenge I could have planned. I thought it was over. I thought Linda would finally disappear, that she would accept her fate and fade into nothing. But women like her? They don't go down quietly. They fight. They claw. They get desperate. And desperation? Makes people dangerous. It happened 2 nights later. I had just gotten home from a business dinner. Life had been good, better than ever. I was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the weight of a marriage that had been a prison long before I ever realized it. I poured myself a drink, sat down in my favorite chair, and let the silence of my house wash over me. And then? Bang. 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 A fist against my front door. I sighed. I already knew who it was. Slowly, I stood up, walked over, and pulled open the door. And there she was. Linda. But this wasn't the woman I had been married to for 43 years. This wasn't the confident, put-together woman who once held herself with the grace of someone who believed she was above consequences. This was a wreck. Her hair was unbrushed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes swollen. She smelled like cheap vodka and bad decisions. And yet? She still had the nerve to smirk. Daniel, she slurred, leaning against the doorframe. Miss me? I didn't answer. She giggled. Oh, come on, baby. You not still mad, are you? I exhaled sharply. Linda. Go home. She laughed. Home? What home? You took everything from me. I met her gaze, my expression cold. No, Linda. You threw everything away. I just made sure you paid the price. She flinched at my words, then shook her head, forcing another laugh. Oh, Daniel, don't be like that. We had a good thing, didn't we? I said nothing. She stepped forward, pressing a hand against my chest. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. Don't you? I grabbed her wrist and removed her hand from me. Go home, Linda, I repeated. Her expression twisted into something ugly. You think you're better than me, she snapped. You think you're some kind of hero? I tilted my head. I think I'm not the one standing drunk on my ex's doorstep, begging to be let back in. Her face turned red with rage. Then she slapped me. Hard. For a moment, there was only silence. She stepped back, chest rising and falling rapidly, waiting for me to break. But I just smiled. You really thought that would do something, didn't you? Her face contorted in frustration. Damn you, Daniel. I gave you my life. I laughed. Actually laughed. No, Linda, I said, stepping closer. I gave you my life. And you threw it away. Now, get the hell off my property before I call the cops. For a second, I thought she was going to hit me again. Then, her expression crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes. Daniel, please. I reached into my pocket. Pulled out my phone. And started dialing. She gasped. You wouldn't. I met her gaze. Watch me. She hesitated. Then, with a final sob, she turned and stumbled away, disappearing into the night. The next morning, I got a call. From the police. Linda had been arrested. Drunk and disorderly. Apparently, after leaving my house, she had wandered into a liquor store, tried to steal a bottle, and then attacked the clerk when he stopped her. Now, she was sitting in a holding cell. And she had given them my number. She's asking if you'll bail her out, the officer said. I smiled. Tell her my answer is the same as it was before. What answer is that, sir? I took a slow sip of my coffee. Not my problem. And then, for the final time, I hung up on Linda Monroe. She was gone. Forever. Linda Monroe was gone. Not just from my life. From everything. Her home. Her money. Her family. Her reputation. And now? Even her freedom. Because the police didn't just release her with a warning. No. They dug deeper. And what they found? Ruined her forever. I was sitting in my office when I got the call. Mr. Monroe? Speaking. This is Officer Davidson. I thought you'd like to know. Linda isn't just facing drunk and disorderly charges anymore. I leaned back in my chair. Oh. There was a pause. Then. We ran her record. Turns out she's got a few unpaid debts. I smirked. How bad? Another pause. Then, a chuckle. Bad enough that she won't be leaving anytime soon. I felt something deep in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction. Pure. Cold. Absolute. Let me guess, I said. Maxed out credit cards? Fraud? Maybe a few unpaid loans? All of the above, the officer confirmed. Plus, tax evasion. Looks like she was moving money around before you froze the accounts. Illegally. I laughed. Loud. She really thought she'd get away with that? Guess so, the officer said. Anyway, thought you'd want to know, she's looking at some real time behind bars. I grinned. Good. Then I hung up. Linda Monroe was never coming back. The news spread fast. By noon, everyone knew. The once proud, once arrogant woman who thought she was untouchable? She was now just another criminal. A disgrace. The texts started rolling in. From my friends. My family. Even some of her old friends. Speech balloon. Damn, Daniel. She really screwed herself over, huh? Speech balloon. Karma finally got her. You must be loving this. Speech balloon. She deserves everything she's getting. And the best one? From my daughter. Speech balloon. She called me from jail. I didn't answer. I smirked. Linda had officially lost everything. And now? She had to rot in it. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey. I walked onto my balcony, looking out over the city. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more woman pretending to love me while betraying me behind my back. Linda Monroe was gone. And I? I was just getting started.